Hello everyone. So today I actually want to tell you something about it's an interesting topic that I'm actually talking about right now. The name of that topic is actually that if you will look at India right now, we does not have a tech ecosystem. We does not have a any domestic app that is universally accepted. If you would look at it in that scenario, why is that? Actually, what is the reason for that? So I was, you know, looking at, I was reading some articles. I was actually looking. It is very hard to like find one reason. Like there is not just one reason. There are multiple reasons, but on top of that, there are some significant reasons are there, which prohibits India to have its own tech ecosystem. So first I just want to tell you that why we doesn't have it. Okay, so you have to go back at least you know like 6 7 decades back when World War II was happening. So what happened is that when World War II was happening, during that time Germany has its own power. Okay, so that was an axis and there was an allied powers in the World War II. So Germany has the best engineers and the best engineering products they were making during the World War II. Whether it was tanks, it was their medicine, it was their vehicles, it was their air force. Every every German inventory and every German product was considered to be best at that time during World War II. And these things were seen and perceived by United States. And they realized something is that, you know what, if we need to dominate this world in technology at least, we have to take some hard measures, we have to take some hard and significant routes, you know to make sure that we dominate the world, at least from the technology point of view. Weapons, infrastructure, good weapons, good air force, good vehicles, good medicine, nuclear weapons. So all these things demands like good scientists, engineers, right? And Germany already had that thing, so that's why they were dominating the Europe during the World War II. It was just because they started war on both front, like Eastern Front. They started war with Soviet Union, and on the Western Front they started war with Allied powers. So they got smashed in between those two front, and that's why they lost it. Otherwise, they would have won the whole Europe. So what is actually the reason that India doesn't have its own Silicon Valley is because, or any app in India is not universally accepted, is not just a 1 or 2 year that we are lagging. It has been happening since 7 or 8 decades. Why? Because after World War II, when US realized that Germany is dominating the world in technology, we need to take some hard measures. So what they did post World War II, that was actually like the Cold War era between Russians and Americans. That's when you realize all they were making all these nuclear weapons. They were launching spaceships to the outer space. They were making all these space missions, they were making computers. So they were actually leading towards tech because they wanted to prove the entire planet, the entire world, that we are the best country, whether it was the Red Army, which was Soviet Union, or which was US, the United States. And US somewhere was leading because US has some of the Nazi engineers. After the war was ended, they gave them shelter in the United States. So they had some best German engineers. So that's why they were able to do certain things which the Soviets they were not able to do. So that's when you see all these Apollo missions. The first person to go on moon, Neil Armstrong, he was the first person to land on moon. That happened why? After post World War II, when US realized that we need to invest a very large amount of money in our R&D, in our research and development. That's when only we will get our significant results. So they did that in 40s and 50s. And if you will look, when do they started getting when do they start getting all their results? Like, when do they start getting all their results? It was 90s, it was 80s, late 80s and early 90s. That's when you will see the first, like, US based applications are universally accepted, and the first Google was made in US, Macintosh was made in US, or you can see PayPal was made in US. So every first generation applications were made in US. Why? Because they had a history of 4 to 5 decades. They started investing in 40s. That's when they got the result in early 80s, late 80s, early 90s, late 90s, and then early 2000s. That is the reason why they got their result. But now, if you look at India, India got its independence very late. In 1947, we got our independence. Okay, so what happened after independence? Jawaharlal Nehru was the prime minister of this country, right? And that country was not capable to walk on its own feet. Why? Because we were abolished from our fundamental rights for more than 200 years. So we just got our independence, right? So there was no constitution, there was no, rules, regulation, policies, nothing. We were literally starting to walk on our feet when we got our independence. When the infant is born, he does not starts like running by the time he is born. First he needs to crawl, then he gets up on his feet, and then he walks, and then 2 3 years later he started running. So we got our independence very late. And that India, 1947 India, the Indians were living in that time, they didn't have the knowledge to build something, to create something on its own. Because if you will look at India, the history of India has never been inclined towards science and tech. It's more inclined towards, Hindu and Astra and Shastra, Gyan, like all these type of knowledge, like knowledge about weapons, knowledge about medical science, all these things. But it was never inclined towards science, towards waves, electronics. It was never related to. If you look at the India of 14th, 15th century, in 14th, 15th, 16th century, the scientists were still there in Europe, but there were no scientists. They were contributing to the science that were living in India. So that's why that India was very new to build or to create something on its own. So we didn't invest it in our 40s, in our 50s, 60s, 70s, because we were struggling on our own, with our own problems. There was a lot of things in India, like untouchability was there, religious disputes were there, people were hating on each other on the basis of religion, caste, and everything. So when the country is fighting its own dispute, it does not have the capacity to invest in the R&D of that country. That's why India didn't invest that much money in the R&D. Even if they would have started doing that in 50s or 60s of India, I'm not saying that we would have got result by 90s or by 80s, but at least post 2000 we would have got some domestic made applications. But we didn't get that as well. If you look in India, the this whole entrepreneurship boom that you're seeing in India right now, it came after 2015, 2016, when internet became cheap and people started consuming it, and they started gaining knowledge from all the resources of internet. That's when they started thinking about building something, about creating something. But that was not the mentality of Indians who were living in India in 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, right? They were not their study. Like, for example, if I talk about my parents didn't even have a subject called computer science when they were studying in 11th, 12th. They never had. When my father did BCom, when he did BCom, he did it, I think he did his BCom in 91, 92. He didn't study even about computer science. My mother is just 12th pass. He never studied anything about computers and computer science and programming. So in a country where there was no resources or there was no motivation, related to computers, then how the hell can you expect that country to build something in 80s and 90s? And that's why you see that India was not able to build or create something in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000 of this country, because our people didn't have the resources, didn't have the motivation, didn't have the mentorship, the support from the government to build something. In US it has. In US, like, if you live in the Bay Area, if you live in the San Francisco, you have, and it is not just from today. If you would go in the 90s also, the San Francisco was not that big as it is right now, but it was still, the companies were there, people were making their own companies. The Amazon was made in 94, I think. PayPal was made in 99. Google was made in 91. Then there was a lot of internet search engines which were being made in 90s and early 2000 of Bay Area, because people had idea what is programming language and what is, how to create an application or how to create a website. But the 90s of India, like our parents, when they grew up, they never had even a programming subject in their school. So how the hell can you expect them to build something? So that's why you see that today we do not have our Silicon Valley, or we are growing right now in terms of, like, obviously in terms of tech. The current generation of India is building a lot of things, a lot of creative ideas, but the past generation of India didn't have the enough resources to build or to create something on its own. That's why you see that India doesn't have its own, like, Indian apps are not universally accepted. Like, that's what I'm saying. For example, if you look at China, China has his own domestic applications which are used by the people of that country, but India doesn't have, because it's now too late for the government to ban all the applications that are being consumed by Indians, and to make the domestic apps that are being accepted by each and every Indian. That will not happen. You know why? The user experience, that applications might not be able to give you the same user experience that Instagram is giving you or that Twitter is giving you. If we make our domestic apps, and if the government force the people of this country to uninstall all the US based applications in your phone and just download the domestic application of this country, the people of this country might not get the same amount of user experience by using the domestic apps, because when you start something, things are shit. So when you start something, things are not really great. So people might have to, cater it. For example, in China, Google was banned in 2008, 2009, I think. So at that time, the government implemented its own applications. So there might be a possibility that when they launch their WeChat, you can say, or Youku, which was their own YouTube, it might not be that great. But who knows? At that time, there was not a lot of internet users were there. So they forced to ban those apps, and they ban it, and they launch their own, because at that time the internet users were less. So it was possible to control them. Now in India, the Indian government cannot ban these applications and just completely force the people of this country to use the domestic apps, because they might not get the same user experience, or they might not even have the data center to control this amount of data. You need data center, you need big data centers. That is there in San Francisco, in California, but not in India. And if you need it in India, then it requires billions of dollars, not millions, billions. 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, maybe 100 billions of dollars will be invested. That's when we can even think about to make our own applications, that first generation apps will be accepted by the people of this country. And if there is someone who makes a very intuitive and a very creative idea, then it might go also international as well. So that's what I wanted to talk in this video, that why we do not have our own domestic applications which are universally accepted, and why India doesn't have its own Silicon Valley. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.